Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Day 2 of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. No firefights yet in Ukraine as I open today's show. I hope you're doing well on this Wednesday. After the show, I have to make the dreaded trip to Florida, the free state of Florida. I love being in the free state of Florida. I don't like getting there, but Ed Morrissey will be in for me tomorrow and Friday. Let me run down what the president said yesterday. He imposed, of course, a wave of sanctions immediately criticized by the people who follow this most closely, like Tom Cotton and Mike Pompeo, is completely weak and inadequate. In fact, here's Tom Cotton on Fox with John Roberts yesterday responding to the sanctions. Cut number one.
Let's get some analysis from Republican Senator of Arkansas, Tom Cotton. Senator, you heard what the president had to say. You were critical of him earlier today for a tepid response. He's clearly upped it a bit. 2 blocking sanctions on Russian banks, including their military bank. Is that enough?
No, John, unfortunately, it's not enough. I mean, at least it's a step in the right direction. I wouldn't even call it half measure, though. It's probably more like a quarter measure. Sanctions on a couple banks and some oligarchs. I've been calling for months now for the kind of punishing sanctions that Joe Biden and Western leaders keep promising but never revealing. Permanently canceling the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, not just shuffling some bureaucratic paper around its review. Imposing sanctions on Russia's oil and gas sectors, its mineral and mining sectors, the critical industries in that country, clamping down on its financial industry and its access to the international banking systems. These are the kind of sanctions that are called for now, not these quarter measures that were just announced or that Berlin announced earlier today about Nord Stream 2. I mean, unfortunately, the administration spent the first 24 hours debating whether to even call this invasion an invasion, and the president took 80 minutes to come out for his own press conference, which doesn't exactly project confidence and certainty and resolution to people watching in Moscow. So much more is called for right now, John, than what we just heard.
Yeah, it's actually not deterring anything, and Putin has made a judgment about the West that he will accept whatever mosquito bites of sanctions that have come up thus far. And the thing that Senator Cotton said that is so true is that the Russians did not dismantle Nord Stream. They didn't sign a piece of paper. And Putin knows that the infrastructure is there, and when they get cold, they'll sign the piece of paper. Jennifer Griffin, terrific reporter with Fox News Channel, talking to Bret Baier last night, cut 19.
Putin has options tonight militarily, but if Putin opts for a full invasion, the justification of which he laid out in his speech today, here's what we can expect to see. Electronic warfare combined with cyber attacks will disaggregate and paralyze the Ukraine government and military. Anything on the communication, GPS, or magnetic spectrum will go dark. This period of pre-assault fire would then be followed by salvos of ballistic missiles, those Iskander missile units in Belarus. Russian 4th and 5th generation attack aircraft will then flood the airspace. Think blitzkrieg, waves of attacks that will look like U.S. shock and awe at the start of the U.S. invasion of Iraq, targeting air defense systems, command and control sites. The next wave will include tube artillery and rocket launchers, likely in the wee hours of the morning. Then he will insert his special forces, who we are told have target lists of Ukrainian journalists and civil society leaders. Tonight, Brett, we are witnessing the beginning of the end of the post-Cold War architecture, which ensured a rules-based order, stability, and respect for the sovereignty of nations. The world must now brace itself for what follows.
Hey, Jennifer Griffin has exactly the right tone that I think eludes people like the Metternich of MSNBC, Ben Rhodes, cut number 16, talking to Andrea Mitchell.
I think, again, the challenge here is Vladimir Putin doesn't seem to care. He knew that these sanctions were coming. I think the U.S. had communicated to Russia precisely the kind of sanctions that would be coming. So I don't think he's in any way caught off guard by this announcement.
Remembering very well, as I will be talking later with H.R. McMaster, the red line that Ben and Barack Obama erased in Syria. He doesn't really have to worry about the West because he's dealing with a Democratic president. And it is that clear. ABC News war correspondent Ian Pinnell last night talking about Putin cut 17.
We've seen Russian sanctions imposed on Russia in the past, and they haven't had the desired effect. I really have serious questions as to whether or not this is going to stop Putin. The tone from what we've heard would suggest it probably won't.
It probably won't. Deputy National Security Advisor John Feiner was on CNN on Monday and on Tuesday. Here he is on Monday night, refusing to say that Russia is beginning an invasion. Cut number 14.
If Putin is putting troops in Donbass, he calls them peacekeeping, but they are military troops. Do you define that as an invasion?
So what President Putin has done already today is something that we are appalled by but not surprised by. The entire spectacle that unfolded in Moscow was more or less predicted publicly by President Biden in some of his comments, by Secretary of State Tony Blinken in his comments to the UN Security Council, and something we were prepared to respond to, and indeed already have responded to, through an executive order that this administration put out tonight. We have also said that we plan to take additional actions tomorrow in terms of what is actually happening on the ground in the Donbass region of Ukraine. We have seen reports, but we are basing our actions on what Russia actually does, not the statements that Russia makes. We're going to continue to assess overnight any steps that Russia takes, and we will be prepared with a significant response tomorrow.
Okay, so let me just understand, though, then, just the basics. I understand you're waiting to see if they actually walk over the line. But the Secretary of State, of course, Tony Blinken, said very specifically on January 21st that if Russian forces move across the border into Ukraine, it's a, quote, renewed invasion. So this would be, if one troop walks over that border or drives over, however it is, a renewed invasion, correct?
So I'm going to repeat what I just said, which is we are not going based on what Russia has stated. I understand they've made a statement about deploying what
No,
they
I know,
call
I understand that, but I'm saying I understand they haven't done it yet. But if they, right, but I'm sorry, we have a bit of a delay. I don't mean to be talking over you. But if a troop comes over that border, if that happens in the next 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever it is, when that happens, is that an invasion?
What I'm telling you is that we will be prepared with a significant response tomorrow based on whatever it is Russia does.
So that's Monday night. Tuesday night, he goes on to say, okay, now we're set. This is so weak. Remember, Moscow is watching all this. He's the Deputy National Security Advisor. He looks like the model UN kid. Cut number 15.
So you called this the beginning of the latest Russian invasion of Ukraine. Is that different than an invasion?
I think latest is important here. An invasion is an invasion, and that is what is underway. But Russia has been invading Ukraine since 2014. They've been occupying large pieces of Ukraine since 2014, including, although they've denied it, Russian troop presence in exactly the two, what they now call republics, but that are really provinces of a sovereign Ukraine that they recognized yesterday. So Russia is essentially making overt what it has denied for some time, which is a Russian troop presence in these places, and we are taking steps.
Enough of Jonathan Feiner. We now know that we don't have to watch Jonathan Feiner. He's the guy they send out whenever they don't know what to say, and he goes, abba, dabba, dabba, dabba. Wall Street Journal editorial this morning, at least the administration overcame its initial reluctance, that would be Mr. Feiner, to call Vladimir Putin's deployment of troops in eastern Ukraine as an invasion. Mr. Biden on Tuesday called it the beginning of a Russian invasion. He responded with what he said was the beginning of greater sanctions. The White House bet seemed to be that the sanctions restraint will cause Mr. Putin to settle for holding the region his forces now occupy and foregoing an assault on Kyiv. But the Russian has never been deterred by Western restraint in the past. He may see this as more weakness. Of course he sees it as more weakness. People have got to focus not on what Jonathan Feiner at the NSC says, not at what President Biden says at a press conference in which he takes no questions because he cannot give good, resolute answers. They got to focus on the killer that is Putin. I've got a new column in the Washington Post on this. The killer that is Xi, the killer that is Putin, the killer that is Ayatollah Khamenei are the new axis of evil. Those three people are killers. You can't believe a word they say. They stand there. They're just going to do what they do until they get stopped. And right now it's up to the Ukrainian military to stop them, and we got to be sending everything that can fly to help them stop them, because there's going to be a war, because there's been nothing said by Joe Biden that would in any way intimidate the Russians. I want to go back to his Ukraine address yesterday, cut number 3.
Yesterday, the world heard clearly the full extent of Vladimir Putin's twisted rewrite of history, going back more than a century, as he waxed eloquently, noting that, well, I'm not going to go into it, but nothing in Putin's lengthy remarks.
He can't read. He can't read a prompter. He said eloquently. I mean, he can't read a prompter. The President of the United States, Vladimir Putin, has judged him not capable of responding coherently, and he's right. I'll be right back, America. What do you think? 1-800-520. 1234. 1-800-520-1234. Connection to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. The Democrats have an agenda. Inflation at home, appeasement abroad, teachers' unions first, students last, open border, and closed schools. It's a very, very easy to see objective and agenda. And now we add to it appeasement. I'm joined by Senator Rick Scott of Florida, chairman of the National Republican Senatorial Committee. Good morning, Senator Scott. How are you?
Good morning. It's a scary time in the world when we have such a weak president, and we have Democrats that have gone off and now are controlled by the radical left.
Now, I want to begin with the headline over at Politico this morning, Senator Scott, because I don't think it's true. It's Politico. It's left-wing. Republicans descend into foreign policy factionalism over Russia-Ukraine standoff. This is an attempt, I think, to sow discord in a united caucus that Joe Biden is weak. Is there any disagreement among the caucus that Joe Biden is simply an appeasement president?
He's an appeasement president, and he didn't do anything to hold Russia accountable. He's scared to death of holding Russia accountable. What Republicans believe is you have to hold these thugs accountable. I mean, we shouldn't have approved Nord Stream 2. There should have been sanctions on Putin before he invaded, and they ought to be tougher now. That's exactly where Republicans are. We all know that we're stuck 3 more years with a very weak president, and we've got a Democrat House and Senate that won't hold these thugs accountable and won't even hold our president accountable.
You know, after Bill Clinton lost his majority in '94, he began to agree with the Republican Congress. Do you think the same thing will happen with President Biden? Will he have to up his game if we've got the House and the Senate, Senator Scott?
Well, I believe we're going to get the House and the Senate. I hope he does. I hope he wants to work with us. But if you look at the people he's appointed, they're radical left people. You look at the people around him, they were militant left people. They're defund the police people. They want government to run everything. It's the big leftist woke crowd that's all around him.
Well, let me also go to the second Politico article this morning. Rick Scott pushes own GOP agenda as McConnell holds off. Now, I talked to both of you, and I know that this isn't true, but this is what you're going to run into, Senator. An attempt to sow discord where there isn't. There's only different variations of the same opinion condemning the president's weakness. But what do you say to Politico when they say Rick Scott pushes own GOP agenda as McConnell holds off?
Well, first off, I completely agree with Mitch McConnell that the election's generally going to be about the Biden agenda. And I think the Biden agenda is so unpopular that we're going to have a great November. We both agree that, candidates need to have a plan of what they're going to do when they get into the Senate or in the House. And so I put out my ideas. There will be other ideas. I have an 11-step plan. You can go see it at rescueamerica.com, or text America to 22044, 22044. So you can look at it. Give me your ideas. I'm sure there's things you don't agree with. There are things that we're going to have to add. There are things that, that we're going to improve on. But I believe it's important that all of our candidates be talking about what they want to do. It's not the NRSC plan. It's the Rick Scott plan. It's what I believe in. I'm a business guy. I'm a plan guy. In my business life, I created plans. I worked my plans. That's how I had success as governor. I ran on a very specific plan. I implemented the plan, and we turned Florida around. I hope to do the same thing with the federal government. We've got to rescue this country.
Now, your plan's got to center on 7 Senate seats: Missouri, New Hampshire, Georgia, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Arizona. So as I do when I talk to you at least once a month, Senator, I want to go through them. In New Hampshire, do we have 1, 2, or 3 viable candidates? And I don't want to mess around with people who are running for 1% or first time in, that sort of thing. Yeah. How many viable candidates have we got in New Hampshire?
I think a lot of people believe that Chuck Morris and Kevin Smith are going to have a good primary. One of them will win, and we'll beat Maggie Hassan in November. They're great candidates. This is a great cycle for us, and Maggie Hassan is underwater on her fave.
Do they have an early primary in New Hampshire, Senator?
No, it's late, and I talked to retired Senator Judd Gregg about that. He says he thinks it's going to be good for us because we're going to be in the news. Maggie Hassan is completely defined, so he's, it's late. I think it's September even. Maybe it's our latest one, and he feels good that we have a great chance of winning there, and both Chuck Morris and Kevin Smith There's another individual in the race, Sherman, but we're going to have a good candidate there.
Now, in Arizona, I moderated a debate 2.5 weeks ago. 4 out of the 5 candidates, Mark Brnovich, the Attorney General, did not participate. He's prepping for the Supreme Court case. I think he's arguing today. That doesn't look to me like any of those 5 are going away before August. So that's a long, drawn-out in the desert battle. Is that good in your eyes?
Well, it'd be nice if we had a candidate earlier, but that's not reality. The positive is Mark Kelly is now defined as Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer is not popular in Arizona. If you look at a generic ballot, you say Mark Kelly or a Republican wins. And so we're going to have a primary. We've got great people in the primary. One of them will be the victor. And there's no reason, if we run a good race, we raise our money, there's no reason we can't win out there. Now we got to raise our money. Mark Kelly's raising a lot of money. So we're going to have to raise our money out there. So I hope people get involved and help whoever they believe is the best candidate.
Now, in Missouri is the race in which I've taken a position, so I can't moderate a debate. I don't think Eric Greitens can win in Missouri, but there are other candidates who can. Has President Trump endorsed in that race, Senator Scott?
No, he's not endorsed. I'd be surprised if he does. Josh Hawley endorsed Vicky Hartzler, and Ted Cruz endorsed Eric Schmidt. Billy Long's in the race also. That's
Democrat Cortez Masto. You agree with me on that?
Absolutely. We've done a poll at the NRSC. There's public polls to show Adam Laxalt beating Cortez Masto. Schumer's already spent the money to try to beef up Cortez Masto. It's not working. Adam has a primary, but Adam right now is way ahead in his primary. So I think Adam will be the next senator from Nevada.
Now, Georgia is where Herschel. I've been down to do an event with Herschel, interview him. I'm not endorsing him. I know there might be other people in there. But it does seem to me that he is inevitably going to be the nominee, and he's going to have to match up against Raphael Warnock, who is fiery, right? You've gotten to know Pastor Warnock. He's fiery. Will that work in Georgia? I think actually the Democrats are underwater in Georgia bigly, and they're hoping on a governor primary to destroy the GOP, but it ain't going to happen.
Well, we're going to win. It's still a Republican state. We're going to be able to find Warnock. Right now, you're right. Herschel Walker's leading in the primary by a long shot. He's run his race. I know he's working hard to make sure he knows the issues well. Here's the only negative. Warnock's raising a lot of money, so we've got to all do everything we can to help Herschel Walker or anybody else. If you have another candidate in the primary you like better, but we've got to help them because we've got to make sure that they have the resources to win.
All right, now let's go to the two that are very difficult to do. Pennsylvania and Ohio. Let's save Ohio for last. Pennsylvania, you have 3 great candidates. I mean, I've had all 3 on the show. They're all great. What do you do? They have an early primary, though, don't they?
Yeah, I can't remember the exact date, but theirs is earlier. Some of these states are changing because of the redistricting. But we've got very good candidates in Pennsylvania. They're going to have a very heated primary. It's already started. They have the resources to do that. But whoever has the best ideas and works the hardest, they're going to come out. And look, we can win there because the logical, either it doesn't matter who is on the other side. They're going to be a Bernie Sanders type candidate on the Democrat side. So it's a state that we should win. If we run a good race, then we're going to win there.
All right. Last one is Ohio, my home state. Now, Bernie Moreno dropped out this week. Kellyanne Conway and Rob Portman joined up with Jane Timken. Does that in any way foreshadow a Trump endorsement? Does it give you any sense of which way that race is going?
Trump might endorse in that state. I'll actually be surprised. They're going to have they've got great people in the primary. I can say good things about every one of the candidates in there. So I think it'll be interesting to see who wins there, but it's still a Republican state, and their candidate will be a Bernie Sanders type candidate. He'll try to be the Democrat candidate will try to go to the middle, but he's not. He's a lefty, and so we just have to have our money and define him.
So I went over to rescueamerica.com, Senator. I want to read to the audience what the statement says that you say. America is waking up to the gross incompetence of the Biden administration and the extremism of the woke left. Check, check. Among the things, the militant left plan to change or destroy our American history. Check. Patriotism. Check. Border security. Check. Christianity. Check. The nuclear family. Check. Gender. Check. Traditional morality. Check. Capitalism. Check. Fiscal responsibility. Check. Opportunity. Well, opportunity, as you and I understand it, Senator. They have opportunity for government people. Rugged individualism, the Judeo-Christian ethic, dissent, free speech, colorblindness, law enforcement, religious liberty, and private ownership of firearms. That's quite a list. So I am confused only, Senator, at rescueamerica.com. How is it mixed up with WinRed?
Well, WinRed is for a campaign. WinRed is where you can go and help whoever you believe. We raise money through WinRed for the NRSC. This is what I personally believe, totally separate than my job as chairman of the NRSC. This is what I personally believe we ought to be talking about. We ought to be very clear. When you elect when you elect me, this is what I'm going to try to do. I know every candidate's going to have their own version of this. They're going to talk about what they're going to do when they get up here, but I think it's important that Republicans have a plan of what they're going to accomplish when we get the majority back, which I believe we will.
RescueAmerica.com. And what's the text number, Rick Scott?
Text America to 22044.
America 22044. Did I get that right?
Yes, that's it.
Good to talk to you, Senator. I'm off to your state today, to the free state of Florida. I've never been to Fort Lauderdale today, so I'm going to touch down in Fort Lauderdale later today, and I doubt I'll see you in the airport, but safe travels to you, too.
All right, take care. I'll be close.
I'm Hugh Hewitt. Salena, Zito, of course, from Yinzerland. We couldn't have our Yinzer report on Monday because it was President's Day, and I like to point out Pennsylvania's never had a president, and Ohio has most of them. And in Pennsylvania, it's true. Why is that? I don't know why you can't produce a president, Salena. What is the problem there?
We have produced two, but I really don't want to comment on either Buchanan or Biden at this moment.
Well, you don't count Biden as a president. He's not from Scranton. He's a Delaware president. I mean, not just passing through. And Buchanan is the worst president in the history of the United States. You're going to really lay claim to him? He's a Southerner in Pennsylvania disguise.
No, so that's what, yes, you guys have had many great presidents.
Many great presidents, because it's Ohio. The good people come across through. Salena, I want to know, around your neck of the woods, as we say in our neck of the woods, what do people think about what's going on in Russia, Ukraine, and what Biden is doing and the United States is not doing?
People are really just distraught by how the West, or how we have gotten ourselves in this position, and the failure of a strong diplomacy has just sort of led us down this path. I mean, that is sort of, if you crowdsourced people's opinions, that is where we are right now. They just cannot believe, or actually they can believe, they don't want to believe that this is the position that we find ourselves in.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, you'll find a lot of Ukrainian Americans in our two states. You'll also find them up through Michigan and into Minnesota. It's where Ukrainian Americans came when they got out of the old country, by and large. So there's a lot of Orthodox churches, et cetera, Deer Hunter, et cetera. What have you heard from any of these people? What's happening as their country gets threatened by the thug?
Yeah, you hear about as you point out, a lot of migrated here a century ago during that Great Migration, and the beautiful churches are dotted all through the hills around here, and there's a lot of still connection, and they still have family there, and people are deeply concerned because of the aggression that Russia has shown. But, they have been worried about this since 8 years ago during the Obama administration, when Russia went after Crimea, and we didn't even blink.
No, we didn't. Now, I am curious what you think the reaction is to the framing of President Trump's statement yesterday to Buck Sexton. Made it sound like he was admiring of Putin. I don't believe he is. I think he is like George C. Scott saying, Rommel, you magnificent blink. I read your book. That's what he's saying, but that's not what's being reported. What do people believe President Trump said?
They don't think that statement was an admiration of Putin. They do think it's an acknowledgement that is who he's acknowledging who Putin is.
It resonates with anyone who's seen the movie, but if you haven't seen the movie, George C. Scott is playing Patton.
Yeah.
It's a tank battle. They destroy Rommel, and he said, "Rommel, you magnificent blank. I read your book."
Yes.
He doesn't think he's a magnificent blank. He thinks he's a very talented, evil guy.
Yes, absolutely. Unfortunately, the press has still not figured out that thing I said in 2016 where people take him seriously, but not literally.
Right.
But the press is, but the people that want to interpret Trump as the most evil possible are always going to take everything that he says and put it in a category that is unacceptable in polite society.
I have been noticing this all night long, thinking to myself, everybody knows he doesn't mean to approve of Putin. Everybody knows that, and yet you couldn't get away from that interpretation of his comments yesterday. He does not approve of Putin's legacy. He does not approve of Putin's thuggery, his invasion. He simply is commenting on his tactics in the way that Patton might have commented on Rommel's tactics. They're enemies. But they talk to each other. I don't understand the obsession. And we're in the middle of a world coming apart in Europe. And I want to give you the last minute. And our press is focused on a former president.
Well, it's astounding. I was flipping through channels yesterday, and two of our three channels were doing nothing but still obsessing about Trump and or not even talking about Ukraine, but talking about Trump. Yeah. And I'm thinking, there's a reason y'all are losing viewers and people are turning their televisions off. Is because you have this unbelievable obsession with this man.
It's an addiction.
He's gone. He's not president. He's not president.
It's Trump addiction. He's not the president. He's not particularly eloquent either. But at the same time, Putin didn't invade Ukraine on his watch. I think that's what this is all about, is they know that's the inescapable fact, but we will see. SelenaZito.com for all of Selena's commentary, including her latest on the Republican Senate race candidate David McCormick over at Washington Examiner. I just tweeted out one. Come back for hour 2 of the Hugh Hewitt Show. America, bonjour, hi, Canada. The latest breaking news. Ukraine has declared a nationwide state of emergency. A full-scale invasion is coming in the next 24 hours, according to Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Breaking news always first when we get it here at the Hugh Hewitt Show. I'm joined by Jake Sherman of Punchbowl News. Now, Punchbowl News is very interesting this morning because it's like the March of the Doomed. Representative Susan Wild, Representative Josh Gottheimer, Representative Dan Kildee of Michigan, Mike Levin of California. The list goes on and on. Mickey Sherrill of New Jersey, Andy Kim of New Jersey, Stephen Horsford of Nevada, Susie Lee of Nevada. Honestly, this is like a casualty list, Jake.
Well, we wanted to, our goal here, and you're referring to our special edition, which digs into the race for the House of Representatives.
Yes.
Our goal was to get people on the record on what they think of Biden and how they're going to campaign in 2022. And Democrat, listen, Hugh, the reality is this, and if you don't, not you, if one doesn't want to admit this, then they're lying to themselves and they're not being honest about the climate. Obviously, Democrats are behind the 8 ball in 2022. Whether you want to admit that or not is up to you. And our goal was to try to elucidate how some of these people are thinking about it. I mean, we don't feel. I'll just give you a sense into our thinking really quickly. I hope not to bore you here. We try to be even and fair. We're not looking, but that doesn't mean that you can't state that Democrats are likely to lose the House.
That's right. I mean, you asked Tom Emmer the hard questions. You asked Maloney the hard questions. It's just asking but they are into a very heavy wind, and Ukraine being invaded by Russia doesn't help them.
Yeah, I'd say it just. Hugh, I really do think that there's like what Mike Allen used to call in Playbook back in the day, mood music, which is that there are like all of these things are contributory to just a sour climate, right? I mean, I think that we could say that for sure. The Afghanistan withdrawal, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. Mitch McConnell yesterday in Lexington, we had this in our midday edition, said he didn't think that Russia would have invaded Ukraine if the withdrawal from Afghanistan hadn't happened and wasn't botched. So all that being said, I think it's all contributory to just a sour climate. And we'll see if Biden can turn it around in some way or put a new face on it on Tuesday night, less than 1 week from today at his first State of the Union.
I will be watching that with great interest. I'll be on with Brett Baer that night giving analysis of the State of the Union. The president faces the unenviable position of a scattered crowd. It will not be jam-packed in the House of Representatives, which I think many people are going to get a visual they have never seen before. Jake, tell me a little bit about yesterday's announcement by the president. He's done 2 speeches in 2 days, neither of them overwhelming, both of them underwhelming, both of them widely criticized by Republicans. He's kind of in a catch-22. If he doesn't show up, his numbers go down. If he does show up, his numbers go down.
Well, I would say this. I mean, the administration, behind the scenes, and we've reported this as it happened, behind the scenes, the administration pushed Senate Democrats to resist any pre-invasion sanctions of Russia. That is something that Mitch McConnell and Senate Republicans vehemently disagreed with. And at the end of the day, that alone is what killed, not that alone, but that is the major factor that killed the sanctions package before Congress left about a week ago. So now Republicans say, and even some Democrats privately say, the administration is playing catch up in some regard, and that's difficult to do. But the administration felt as if, it's difficult to argue a counterfactual, but felt as if the sanctions would be more would have more bite if they came after Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine. And I don't know that. I mean, I'm not sure that the big thing is this, Hugh, and I think you know this, but the big kahuna is cutting Russia off from the financial system, kicking them out of the SWIFT banking system, which facilitates transactions around the country, around the world rather. That would require international buy-in, and the administration has not done that yet.
You know, I actually don't think that is the big kahuna. I know that many people believe that SWIFT is the be-all and end-all, and I'd like to see it. I think it's individually named and expelled oligarchs. Britain did that with 3 oligarchs yesterday, and the House of Commons kind of exploded with quizzical wrath. Like, 3? Really? We can't walk down the street without running into an oligarch in London. And by the way, I've had that happen to me. I just can't believe how many Russian limos and drivers are out smoking cigarettes while the boss is inside drinking vodka late into the evening. The oligarchs are everywhere. They've got to be thrown out of the West, and the president didn't do it, and Boris Johnson only did 3, and Scott Morrison is saying we have a full-scale invasion in 24 hours. Clearly, the will threaten sanctions but not use them hasn't worked. Aren't they? Are they at all concerned that after Afghanistan, right before they give in to the Iranians, and they're about to collapse in front of the Iranians and give them sanctions relief, that they're never going to get the stink off of this year and a half, Jake?
Yeah, I think that they think that and again, this is their view, not mine. They believe that there's too much attention on what's going wrong, not enough attention in their estimation on what's gone right. They believe the infrastructure bill, the American Rescue Package, COVID is receding, which they'll take credit for. All of those things are good and are not getting enough attention. That's up for debate. And the question is, I mean, do all of these things, can they move past them? Can they move past the fact that the face of Europe is changing? Excuse me. Can they move past the fact that that Afghanistan, the withdrawal was kind of a mess? I don't know. I'm not sure how much those register on the radar of the American people when they go to vote. But again, I do think it contributes to an overall sour view of the world and how the world is going at the moment.
Jake, what do you think about the attempt to jump on President Trump's, at best, inartful statement, at worst, downright dumb statement about Putin? I think he was trying to do the George C. Scott in Patton moment, Rommel, you magnificent blank, I read your book, meaning you're an evil son of a gun, but we're just going to recognize that the malevolent genius at work here. And instead, Democrats are running up and down, and of course some of the cable channels are trying to. I just think they're crazy to try and make Trump the story when Putin's invading Russia. What do you think?
So I disagree with you respectfully. I actually don't. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a Trumpologist like many of my colleagues in the press are, but I do think that there is something to be said about I mean, it was a ridiculous statement. I think it was a downright stupid statement. I think it was absurd, and I don't know how you explain that away. I guess that what you're saying makes a modicum of sense, but I think he's saying, that I just think it's a naive statement. That's that. I can't read the guy's mind. But, listen, when things aren't going right for you, make the other guy the boogeyman. That's how it works. And in this case, in my estimation, he's a pretty easy and convenient boogeyman, and it reads true.
That's what they're trying very much, to make Trump the lead story as opposed to Russian aggression. And it's just not going to work, because everyone knows when the tanks start to fire and the rockets start to fall and the buildings start to be demolished, and it's like Israel fighting Hamas or Israel fighting Hezbollah, very quickly the story becomes, and the story is only who's dying. And so I just don't think it's very effective to try and make Trump into a Putin backer. He's not a Putin backer. He's calling him an evil genius. That's what I think he's doing. If he comes out and says, no, he's a real genius, then I'll have my problem with him and I'll articulate it. Jake, in terms of Emmer, when you were talking to him about the Republican prospects, they've got to be worried about confidence becoming too high, right? They got to be worried that everyone's got this in the bag and they're going to get, like the Democrats thought they had 2020 in the bag and they lost 15 seats.
Yeah, Emmer, the NRCC chair, said he wishes the election were today. He says that independents and Republicans are lined up pretty evenly on what's important as compared to Democrats, who believe COVID and climate change are the two most important issues. That's in their internal polling. We asked him about, I thought this was interesting, maybe some people won't, we asked him about Trump and what his impact on the 2020 election is. And he basically said the president's a private citizen. He could do what he wants, but we're looking to November 2022, not November 2020, not the previous election, but the current election. That is something that I think is really is a really good insight into Emmer's mind. Emmer is a very rah-rah salesman type guy, and he has a big job. But here we are in February. It's not November. It's not even close to November. So they have to kind of, I compare it to golf, they've got to get around the course and kind of make as few bogeys as humanly possible to finish out this round, and that takes a lot of discipline and a lot of skill.
Even if your opponent is slicing the ball out of bounds with every swing, like Joe Biden is, you cannot get your mind off your own game, Jake. Great analogy. I agree with that analogy completely. Next week, more Jake Sherman from Punchbowl News. Go to Punchbowl.
Will do everything in his power to use the Iran issue in order to further weaken our response to Ukraine.
Now, Congressman, I'm going to talk with H.R. McMaster later in the show about his book, Battlegrounds, in which he discusses strategic narcissism and how the United States has been self-absorbed and projecting its own values and reactions onto our adversaries and enemies for a long time. If we strike a deal with Iran right now, that will be peak strategic narcissism. I mean, peak, absolute peak. I want to play for you a 2018 statement by Donald Trump. Now, yesterday, President Trump did himself no favors by being ambiguous about the malign nature of Putin. I know he believes that. I know that. I've talked to him about it. But his statement yesterday made it sound like he admires Putin. But I think he was trying to be admiring Putin the way that George C. Scott playing Patton admired Rommel, you magnificent blank. I read your book. Here's President Trump when he's president in July of 2018 at the NATO summit, cut 28.
Well, I have to say, I think it's very sad when Germany makes a massive oil and gas deal with Russia, where you're supposed to be guarding against Russia, and Germany goes out and pays billions and billions of dollars a year to Russia. So we're protecting Germany, we're protecting France, we're protecting all of these countries. And then numerous of the countries go out and make a pipeline deal with Russia where they're paying billions of dollars into the coffers of Russia. So we're supposed to protect you against Russia, but they're paying billions of dollars to Russia, and I think that's very inappropriate. And the former chancellor of Germany is the head of the pipeline company that's supplying the gas. Ultimately, Germany will have almost 70% of their country controlled by Russia with natural gas. So you tell me, is that appropriate? I mean, I've been complaining about this from the time I got in. It should have never been allowed to have happened. But Germany is totally controlled by Russia because they were getting from 60 to 70% of their energy from Russia and a new pipeline. And you tell me if that's appropriate, because I think it's not. And I think it's a very bad thing for NATO. and I don't think it should have happened. Now, if you look at it, Germany is a captive of Russia because they supply. They got rid of their coal plants. They got rid of their nuclear. They're getting so much of the oil and gas from Russia. I think it's something that NATO has to look at. I think it's very inappropriate. You and I agree that it's inappropriate.
Now, Mike Gallagher, congressman, so he was right in 2018. He shot himself in his foot yesterday. Was he right in 2018?
100% right. And the Trump administration's energy policy put us in a dramatically better position to push back against Putin, Iran, and China. And the fact that the Biden administration, starting in week one with the cancellation of the Keystone Pipeline, as well as restrictions on domestic oil exploration and development, has shot our entire country in the foot. And the fact that Biden and Kamala Harris went out there and said, well, Americans need to be prepared to suffer more financial pain because energy prices are going to increase with this conflict in Ukraine. Well, I'm sorry, I don't think working class Americans should have to suffer the financial consequences of Biden's foolish decisions when it comes to American energy policy. It's absolutely absurd, and it's weakening our geopolitical hand internationally. It's taking tools out of our kit that we could be playing in a crisis precisely at this moment. It makes absolutely no sense. I don't understand it. And again, Hugh, I just think we're going to see a scenario soon where part of the administration's justification for an Iran deal that will make the 2015 Iran deal look good in comparison, it'll be the new worst deal in history, will be that by bringing more Iranian crude onto the market, you're going to reduce prices overall, which will be absolutely absurd, with the possible exception of the Democrats' radical policy of infusing diversity, equity, and inclusion and identity politics into every aspect of the federal government and American education, or continued support for masking kids and shutting down schools. I don't know if there's a bigger blunder. Well, and Afghanistan is in that list. If there's a bigger blunder than their misguided energy policy. It makes absolutely no sense. And former President Trump was right when he called that out in 2018.
Now, if I can summarize the Democratic platform, and I try to be objective: inflation at home, appeasement abroad, teachers' unions first, students last, an open southern border, and closed police precincts. I think that fairly sums it up, the substance, Congressman. Am I being fair?
You're being absolutely fair.
And so the question becomes, how do you spin capitulation in Afghanistan and Ukraine? Because this is capitulation. He has not sanctioned anyone before they do anything. I don't understand it. You can't deter someone if they don't know what you're going to do. It doesn't work that way. Because if you base future performance based on past performance, it's no guarantee, but it's likely it's going to be a weak and tepid set of sanctions because he hasn't announced it.
And here's where I think General McMaster's argument about strategic narcissism is so important. Yesterday, President Biden said, who in Lord's name does Putin think gives him the right to declare new countries? Right? That's mirror imaging our value structure onto a Russian thug.
Onto Europe. Onto Europe over 500 years.
What gives him the right is that he has the might and the will to use hard power, and we don't. And we think Putin's going to be deterred by getting disinvited from Davos or a sternly worded statement that comes out of Foggy Bottom. That's just not the way the world works. I wish it did work that way. It'd be a far more peaceful world, but it is an anarchic and competitive world that we must deal with as it is.
In which there are evil and malevolent actors. I want to close on that so no one can misinterpret it. You understand, I understand, the audience. There are evil and malevolent people who are gifted with cunning and a killer's instinct. I think Putin is along with Xi and Khamenei, the evil big three.
I completely agree, Hugh. Just remind General McMaster that though he may be a smart geopolitical analyst, his sports allegiances are even worse than yours. He's an Eagles fan, a Phillies fan, Hugh. It really undermines a lot of his broader...
Well, that's absolutely true. I was unaware of that, so he doesn't know anything about football. But I will bring that up to him, and I'll tell him that on the Intel Committee we actually have it as a matter of fact that the Eagles are horrible. Thank you, Congressman Gallagher. Good to talk. I didn't know that. Welcome back, America. Brian Wesbury is Chief Investment Analyst and Economist at First Trust Portfolio. He is also our friend out on the road. Follow him on Twitter at Wesbury. Brian, good morning. How are you?
Excellent, Hugh. I am excellent. I'm in East Coast time today, so...
Okay, so it's a normal time to be talking to me. My question is, I'm looking at the overseas markets this morning, and they're all up. England, Germany, France. Price of oil is hanging around $95 a barrel. And the question is, has the market priced in a Ukraine disaster, or does the market just desperately hope it doesn't get worse?
I think the market has kind of decided that, okay, this is happening, but it's not happening with a blitzkrieg or a shock and awe. So, it will, peaceful is the wrong word to use because people are dying, but it's not an all-out war with Ukraine, and I think for the market that's pretty important.
Now, Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison is a smart guy, Brian Wesbury, and he leaned in this morning and said full-on invasion within 24 hours. When that happens, what does our market do? I think this is a head fake rally.
Yeah, I think we have priced a lot of this in. I mean, if you think about what's going on this year, we all know that Build Back Better, look, I'm not a Keynesian. I don't think all that government spending was going to do anything for the economy. It might have provided a little artificial boost for a while, but everybody knows now that things failed. Deficits are going to be smaller this year. Everyone knows that the Fed is going to raise interest rates. We don't know how many, but now they tell us it's not going to be 50 basic 2 rate hikes all at once. And then finally, Ukraine is kind of underway, and the world has sort of accepted it. So I think the market, it's a forward-looking mechanism. It tries to price in, okay, what are the dangers? What are the unexpected things that we don't know? And how will they affect profits? And I think what the market has decided is, okay, none of these things are great, but profits will still be up in 2022. And inflation is going to help profits in certain areas, in commodities, materials companies that make aluminum, that make steel, that get gold out of the ground, that grow corn. Those kinds of companies are going to do well this year. So I think we might be through the hard part because now the market expects and has fully priced in all of these events.
Now, the Kremlin, this is the headline from the Washington Post at this hour. Kremlin warns Americans will face financial consequences of U.S. sanctions. Meanwhile, our government is warning our businesses to prepare for possible cyber attacks. This has got to make investors jittery, Brian Wesbury.
Yeah, it does. I think, Hugh, I've put a little bit of thought into this. I probably need to put a lot more. But I think in our world today, the cyber attack, the true all-out cyber attack, is the second worst thing. I mean, I don't want to, guns and bombs and artillery shells are really bad. Don't hear me wrong there. But kind of the second worst thing that can happen next to nuclear war, because I believe, now I'm not a CIA officer, I'm not inside, but I believe that we could turn off the power in Russia. I think I think they would spend 2 weeks getting it back on, and the minute they did, we'd shut it down again if we really wanted to. And this could be devastating, kill lots of people in the middle of a war. And so I don't think the world wants to go in that direction. But it certainly shows us that there's a powerful force out there that's, not quite nuclear war, but gosh, in the middle of winter in Russia, no power is a really bad thing. Same thing in the United States. So I hope we don't go there, and I think that's the one place that could really spook the market if a full-blown cyber war got started.
No, I'm going to talk with General McMaster about that because he writes a lot about it in his new book, Battleground. What would you look for as the first sign, Brian? We got a minute. What would worry you the most? A part of the grid going down or a business announcing that they're offline?
Yeah, the grid going down. That's the number one thing. I mean, if you did that up in the the Northeast or the where I live, where I'm moving away from, Illinois, Minnesota, Wisconsin, North Dakota, South Dakota, that's deadly to lose your electricity. So that's what I would worry about the most. And this idea, by the way, that the White House can fix our supply, can fix energy prices. My line is they can't even make a pencil. How are they ever going to fix a supply chain as complicated as energy?
They have no, I mean, that's just a joke. They have no idea. That's going to be self-correcting or not corrected at all because you can't command and control the LA port, much less the entire American distribution system. Wesbury on Twitter, WESBURY. Brian, thank you. I'm coming back next hour. General McMaster and I set this up a long time ago, but boy, talk about great timing, plus Senator Tom Cotton to lead off the hour. All the latest updates from Ukraine. Stay with us. Glory America, bonjour, hi Canada. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster, former National Security Advisor to President Trump, joins me. His new book, Battleground, opens eerily with a review of the 2014 Russian invasion of Ukraine and the Russian new generation warfare tactics that are again on display. I begin this hour, though, with United States Senator Tom Cotton, who serves on Senate Intel, Senate Armed Services, Senate Judiciary. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Hugh. It's good to be on with you.
I played your commentary to John Roberts. Anything different this morning that you've been able to discover other than Scott Morrison in Australia, the Prime Minister, saying the full-scale invasion within 24 hours?
No, Hugh, I haven't seen any new developments in Ukraine or in Russia beyond what Vladimir Putin said to his own people a couple nights ago and what President Biden said yesterday, which is a welcome step. But as I said yesterday, not even a half measure, probably a quarter measure of what we should be doing, what we should have been doing for a long time. I hope that President Biden will stiffen his spine and start announcing more and tougher sanctions very soon.
I don't know what Vladimir Putin learned at KGB, OCS, whatever the equivalent is, but I'm sure they taught him Lenin's aphorism that when you have a bayonet, proceed as long as you run into mush and stop when you hit steel. Has he even remotely found any steel yet anywhere?
I don't think that we've shown Vladimir Putin steel over the last 4 or 5 months, Hugh. The officials at the highest level of the United States government has known that this was happening before Halloween. That's how long this troop buildup has been occurring. And it became public, I think, in the Christmas season. And we've consistently conciliated and declined to take steps that might have deterred Vladimir Putin. Of course, we had a vote in the Senate last month to impose harsh sanctions on Russia, and the Democrats stopped it. Shockingly, they used the racist relic of the Jim Crow era, as they called the filibuster, to stop those sanctions to get Russia. And they did it at the behest of the Biden White House, Hugh. These are Democrats in the Senate who had voted repeatedly for sanctions against Russia in the past, but the Biden White House furiously lobbied them against it. All of that has just projected weakness and appeasement towards Vladimir Putin. And I think that he viewed the time is right to take what he's always wanted, which is to take back Ukraine into the fold of greater Russia. This is not, Hugh, about NATO. It's not about military exercises. Vladimir Putin knows as well as anyone that Ukraine was not on the verge of joining NATO. There was not some big deadline coming up. We don't conduct military exercises in Ukraine. This is, as you saw Vladimir Putin saying on Russian television a couple nights ago, about correcting what he views as massive historic crimes, depriving the greater Russian Empire of Ukraine, which has been part of it at least since the reign of Catherine the Great, if not beforehand, in his mind.
No, I think he's a sociopath, and I think Putin has really lost any sense of restraint. But tyrants do have to fear the people below him, which is why I do not understand how the oligarchs are still in the West. Yesterday, Great Britain threw 3 of them out. There got to be 300. Congressman Gallagher told us about the Navalny 25. Shouldn't we start naming names and seizing condos, yachts, and mistresses, jewelry, and throwing people out of the West?
We should, Hugh, and again, that's a step that's long overdue. It's a step that actually requires more cooperation from our European allies, because there's a much larger presence of Russian oligarchs and their money in Europe than there is in the United States. It's hard for most Americans to appreciate the vast scale of wealth that these Russian oligarchs possess. I mean, this is wealth on the scale of the czars. Now, a lot of our European partners might hesitate to do that because it's created an effective Russia lobby in the capitals of Europe. Not just the oligarchs, it's their bankers and their lawyers and their consultants and their realtors and their home decorators and their yacht service companies and their property management companies and the ski resort towns where they all vacation and the luxury retail stores in the French Riviera where their mistresses go shop and the private schools where their kids go. All that should end, though. They should all be expelled, and they should all be sent back to Russia where Vladimir Putin can deal with them and their discontented mistresses.
The Telegraph is reporting this morning that Russia's ultra-wealthy oligarchs have lost $32 billion so far this year, and looming sanctions mean even more of their wealth could be wiped out. The country's 23 billionaires currently have a net worth of $343 billion, and so the market, they're just talking about the market. They're not talking about anything that we have done about ejecting people. But does the United States have the authority? Does President Biden have the authority to eject and seize Russians and Russian assets?
For the most part, Hugh. For the most part, he's had the authority to take any action that Democrats in Congress have proposed for the last month. What we've tried to do is to give greater authorities or to require steps to be taken to impose so-called mandatory sanctions that must be imposed. The president doesn't have the discretion to waive, but he has substantial existing authority to take many more steps than he announced yesterday, and I think that's necessary.
Now, Senator Cotton, put your airborne hat on again, back to your combat days. I don't think the Ukrainians are going to roll over. I don't think the Russians are the Germans in 1939. I think they're going to run into a lot of resistance. What do you think, and what do you think about the arms that we've gotten to Ukraine over 4 years?
Well, Hugh, if it was just a ground-to-ground infantry fight, you may be right, but I think you have to remember that Russia vastly overmatches Ukraine in both missiles and air force. So what I worry is that if Russia goes for the jugular, the first 12 to 24 hours, we'll see a massive blitz of missile strikes on Ukraine's command and control structures and critical infrastructure, as well as strategic airstrikes. So much so that Ukraine's command and control of those ground forces could disintegrate in just a matter of a few days, if not a few hours. And that would leave those ground forces, which again might be able to fight for some time, largely in the dark. I think that's probably what Russia's strategy is, if you look at the kinds of forces they've built up on all four sides of Ukraine.
Now, Senator, you remember shock and awe, of course, as well as I do, because you were, I don't know if you were in the Army in 2003, but you were close to it. Shock and awe didn't actually shock and awe Iraq to the extent that we thought, and their leader escaped and hid, and the resistance began. Is that what you anticipate in Ukraine as well?
Hugh, I think that we should support a government in exile if it comes to that point. It's not clear from the forces that Vladimir Putin has positioned around Russia if he intends to seize all of Ukrainian territory. Western Ukraine is very different from the rest of the country in a couple of regards, Hugh. It's much more anti-Russian because it's really never been part of the Russian Empire except for the Soviet era, but for all of history before that, it was largely oriented towards the west under the Habsburg Empire. And second, the terrain is just very different in western Ukraine, much harder for Russian armor to roll through there the way it does the relatively flat plains of the rest of the country. So there may be, even if Vladimir Putin invades, he goes to Kiev, there may still be Ukrainian territory that is beyond his control. But if he does seize all of Ukraine, then we need to support a Ukrainian government in exile somewhere in Europe, safely out of the reach of Russia, just like we did the governments in exile, for example, Poland's government in World War II, which remained in London.
Now, Senator, it hasn't come up yet, but what Putin did in Chechnya were war crimes. If he does in Kyiv what he did in Chechnya, they'll be guilty of war crimes. Has anyone been talking? I mean, if they indiscriminately bomb civilians, those are war crimes. And do we expect that to be demarcated as such,
Uh,
Well, it should be. If Vladimir Putin and the Russian military commits war crimes, they should be held to account. And Hugh, I would note that it's not only indiscriminate bombings of civilians that may happen. You've probably seen the reports of lists drawn up to capture or to kill various Ukrainian officials or dissidents or activists in Ukraine. That could happen on a large scale, Hugh. So, I mean, so much so that Russia is running concentration camps in Ukraine as well. And again, that's something that the West and the civilized world needs to highlight and needs to hold Russia to account for if it comes to pass.
Last question, Senator. Is Putin more in the evil genius camp or in the off his rocker camp? Because after that speech 2 days ago, I thought off the rocker camp. What do you think?
Well, Hugh, I want to point out that speech is nothing new. This is not something that Vladimir Putin just announced. That speech is basically just a lightly edited version of a long essay he published last summer that made all the same points on what he calls the historical unity of the Russians and the Ukrainians. So even if you view his account of history as crazy and revisionist, you shouldn't lose sight of the fact that it's something that he's held for 20 years, so no one should be surprised by the actions he's taking.
Senator Tom Cotton, thank you. Stay on TV talking. Maybe someone at the White House will listen to you. I hope they do.